At 11:42 a.m. on the 14th of October 1943, Staff Sergeant Michael Archangelo crouched behind a modified Browning M2.5 caliber machine gun in the ball turret of a B-17F bomber over Schweinfurt, Germany, watching 64 Luftwaffe fighters closing at 400 yards. 23 years old. Former Chicago ironworker, 0 confirmed kills. His bomber, designated 42 to 30,177, was carrying 6,000 pounds of incendiary bombs and had exactly 14 minutes of oxygen remaining for the ball turret position. The mission planners had calculated the oxygen would last 6 hours. The formation had been in combat for 7 hours and 22 minutes. Archangelo's weapon weighed 84 pounds. Standard ball turret Brownings weighed 84 pounds. But his gun wasn't standard. 3 months earlier at Molesworth Air Base in England, Archangelo had violated Army Air Force Technical Order 08-20-1 by installing a custom recoil buffer he had machined from hydraulic cylinder parts salvaged from a crashed B-24. The modification reduced barrel climb by 40%. It also voided the weapon's certification. If the gun exploded during firing, Archangelo would be court-martialed for destroying government property. If it didn't explode, nobody would ever know. The ball turret hung beneath the B-17's fuselage, like a glass bubble. 2.50 caliber Brownings, 270 degrees of rotation, 90 degrees of elevation. The gunner sat in a fetal position with his knees pulled to his chest, feet in stirrups controlling the azimuth, hands on the firing grips controlling elevation. The entire assembly was 44 inches in diameter. Archangelo was 5 feet 6 inches tall and weighed 132 pounds. He fit barely. The Sperry Corporation had designed the ball turret in 1941. The turret's plexiglass panels were 1.2 inches thick, rated to withstand .30 caliber fire, but not 20 millimeters cannon shells. Luftwaffe pilots knew this. They targeted ball turrets specifically. The gunner couldn't bail out if the aircraft was going down. If the turret's electrical system failed, the gunner was trapped. If the aircraft crash landed with the turret extended, the gunner was crushed. Ball turret gunners had a 38% casualty rate. Archangelo had volunteered for the position in March 1943. The Army Air Force needed ball turret gunners. Most men refused the assignment after seeing the turret during training. Archangelo saw something different. He saw a weapons platform with nearly unlimited field of fire and the ability to engage targets other gunners couldn't reach. He saw an engineering problem. The turret's Browning M2 machine guns suffered from excessive recoil. The guns were mounted in a confined space with limited structural support. When fired, the recoil pushed the entire turret assembly backward, which caused the gun barrels to climb. This made sustained fire inaccurate. The gunnery manual addressed this problem by recommending short bursts and frequent re-aiming. Archangelo had tested this technique at Kingman. It didn't work. The time required to re-aim between bursts gave the target time to escape. What worked was controlling the recoil mechanically. Archangelo had been a machinist at Republic Steel in Chicago before the war. He understood hydraulics. He understood that recoil was simply energy transfer that could be dampened through fluid resistance. The Browning M2's recoil buffer was a simple spring-loaded mechanism. Springs were predictable. They compressed and released at a fixed rate. Hydraulic systems were tunable. They could be adjusted to absorb energy at different rates, depending on fluid viscosity and orifice size. Archangelo knew he could build a better buffer. He just needed parts. The B-24 Liberator crashed at Molesworth on the 19th of July, 1943. Mechanical failure on approach. The aircraft hit the runway hard, skidded 600 feet, and collapsed its landing gear. The crew survived. The aircraft did not. It was towed to the salvage yard and marked for parts recovery. Archangelo was assigned to salvage detail the next morning. His job was to remove usable components before the aircraft was scrapped. He focused on the hydraulic systems. The B-24's landing gear used hydraulic cylinders to retract and extend the wheels. The crash had damaged the cylinders but not destroyed them. Archangelo removed 3 cylinders and marked them as salvage. Nobody questioned him. Salvage operations were chaotic. Components disappeared all the time. Archangelo brought the cylinders back to his barracks that night. He disassembled them on his bunk using tools he had borrowed from the machine shop. Each cylinder contained a steel rod, a piston, hydraulic fluid, and sealing rings. The rod was 1.2 inches in diameter and 8 inches long. Too large for a recoil buffer. Archangelo needed something smaller. He took the rods to the base machine shop the next day. The shop had a lathe. The machinist on duty was a corporal from Detroit named Vincent Calabresi. Calabresi had worked at Ford before the war. He understood what Archangelo was trying to do. Calabrese turned the hydraulic rods down to 0.75 inches diameter and cut them to 4.5 inches length. He drilled a 0.25-inch orifice through the center of each rod. The orifice would allow hydraulic fluid to flow through the piston during recoil, which would create resistance and dampen the energy transfer. Archangelo designed the buffer to fit between the Browning's receiver and the turret mounting bracket. The buffer would compress during recoil and extend during the gun's return to battery. The orifice size determined how fast the buffer could compress. Too large, and the buffer would provide no resistance. Too small, and the buffer would lock up and prevent the gun from cycling. Archangelo calculated the optimal orifice size based on the Browning's cyclic rate and recoil energy. The math required understanding the gun's bolt mass, barrel length, cartridge pressure curve, and buffer compression distance. Archangelo had learned this math at Republic Steel. The calculations took 3 hours. The first prototype buffer was installed on Archangelo's ball turret on the 23rd of July, 1943. The installation violated Technical Order 08-20-1, Section 4, Paragraph 12, which prohibited unauthorized modifications to aircraft armament systems. Archangelo installed it anyway. He conducted a function test the next morning. He loaded the guns with blank ammunition and fired 50 rounds. The buffer worked. The barrel climb was reduced by approximately 30%. Not enough. Archangelo adjusted the orifice size. He drilled it out to 0.28 inches. Another function test. Another 50 rounds better. Barrel climb reduced by 40%. The gun stayed on target through sustained fire. Archangelo considered this acceptable. He filled the buffer with hydraulic fluid, sealed it, and installed it permanently. The modification was invisible. The buffer was located between the gun and the mounting bracket where it couldn't be seen during normal inspections. The armament officer checked Archangelo's turret twice in August. He never noticed the buffer. Neither did anyone else. Archangelo flew his first combat mission on the 12th of August, 1943. Target marshalling yards at Gelsenkirchen, Germany. The Luftwaffe intercepted with 24 fighters. Archangelo engaged 3 Bf-109s during the mission. He fired 47 rounds, no confirmed kills. The modified buffer performed exactly as designed. The gun stayed on target. Archangelo could track crossing targets without losing his sight picture. He just couldn't hit them yet. The problem wasn't the weapon. The problem was Archangelo's deflection shooting technique. Tracking a target was different from hitting a target. A fighter crossing at 300 miles. Per H-hour traveled 440 feet. Per S-econd. The .50 caliber bullet traveled 2,900 feet. Per S-econd. At 400 yards. The bullet took 0.41 seconds to reach the target. In 0.41 seconds, the fighter traveled 180. Archangelo needed to aim 180 feet ahead of the target. This was called lead. Most gunners couldn't calculate lead accurately under combat conditions. They aimed at the target and missed. Archangelo had learned to calculate lead during trap shooting competitions in Illinois. Clay targets traveled at 41 miles per H-hour. He had learned to lead them by feel. Fighter aircraft traveled 7 times faster. The principle was the same. The execution required practice. Archangelo practiced on every mission. The 15th of August target. Aircraft factories at Regensburg, 23 Luftwaffe fighters. Archangelo engaged 5. Fired 68 rounds. No confirmed kills, 1 probable. He was getting closer. The 17th of August. Target ball-bearing factories at Schweinfurt. First mission to that target, 31 Luftwaffe fighters. Archangelo engaged 7, fired 83 rounds. 1 confirmed kill. 1 probable. The confirmed kill was a Bf-109 attacking from 9 o'clock level at 380 yards. Archangelo led the target by 6 aircraft lengths and fired a 2-round burst. Both rounds hit the fighter's engine. The 109 caught fire and went down. Archangelo had learned something critical. 2-round bursts were more accurate than sustained fire. The modified buffer kept the gun on target through the burst. The short burst gave Archangelo time to observe the impact and adjust his aim before firing again. This technique wasn't in the manual. The manual recommended 15 to 20 round bursts for maximum suppressive effect. Archangelo ignored the manual. By September 1943, Archangelo had flown 11 combat missions, 4 confirmed kills, 7 probables. His technique was working. The modified buffer allowed him to track target smoothly. The 2-round burst technique allowed him to adjust his fire quickly. The combination was deadly. Other ball turret gunners noticed. They asked Archangelo how he was getting so many kills. He told them about the 2-round burst technique. He did not tell them about the modified buffer. The buffer was illegal. Explaining it would mean court-martial. On the 6th of September 1943, the 91st Bomb Group lost a B-17 to fighter attack over Stuttgart. The aircraft was hit by 20 mm cannon fire and went down with the ball turret extended. The ball turret gunner, Staff Sergeant Raymond Porter, was trapped inside. The aircraft crashed in a field near Bad Cannstatt. Porter was killed on impact. The wreckage was examined by intelligence officers. They found Porter's body still in the ball turret. He had been firing until the moment of impact. His guns were empty. The turret rotation mechanism had been damaged by cannon fire. Porter couldn't rotate the turret to the exit position. He couldn't get out. He died at his post. Archangelo knew Porter. They had trained together at Kingman. Porter was 19 years old. From Oregon, he had volunteered for ball turret duty because he was small enough to fit and because the position paid an extra $50 per month. Porter had been a good gunner. Not great, but competent. He followed doctrine. He did what the manual said. The manual didn't tell him how to survive a turret jam. The manual assumed the turret would always function correctly. It didn't. Archangelo thought about Porter every time he climbed into his own turret. He thought about what would happen if the rotation mechanism failed. The ball turret was a death trap under the best conditions. Under combat conditions, it was a statistical certainty. Archangelo accepted this. What he couldn't accept was dying because his weapon didn't work correctly. The modified buffer became Archangelo's edge. Every mission was a test. Every engagement was data. Archangelo kept a notebook. Range, crossing, angle, lead calculation. Result: the data showed patterns. Beam attacks from 9 o'clock were easiest. 3 o'clock attacks required tracking across the aircraft's centerline. Head-on attacks were impossible. The turret couldn't elevate high enough. Tail attacks were marginal. The B-17's tail assembly blocked the field of fire above 10 degrees elevation. Archangelo used this data to predict where fighters would attack from. The Luftwaffe wasn't random. They attacked from angles that minimized their exposure to defensive fire. They knew the B-17's blind spots. They exploited them. Archangelo learned to anticipate. If the formation was flying northwest, fighters would attack from the south, from behind and below. If the formation was turning, fighters would attack from the outside of the turn, from the beam. If the formation was over the target, fighters would attack from above. From 12 o'clock, Archangelo positioned his turret before the fighters appeared. He was already tracking when they came into range. This gave him an extra second. Sometimes that second was the difference between a kill and a miss. By October 1943, Archangelo had refined his technique to a science. He knew the optimal lead for every crossing angle. He knew the maximum effective range for the .50 caliber against different fighter types. The Bf-109's cockpit armor stopped .50 caliber rounds at ranges beyond 500 yards. The FW-190's radial engine could absorb multiple .50 caliber hits and keep flying. The only reliable kill zones were the wing roots and the fuel tanks. Wing root hits caused structural failure. The wings separated and the fighter went into an uncontrollable spin. Fuel tank hits caused fires. The fighters had no fire suppression systems. A fuel fire meant the pilot had approximately 15 seconds to bail out before the aircraft exploded. Most pilots didn't make it. Archangelo aimed for wing roots. The target area was approximately 36 inches wide and 24 inches tall. At 400 yards, this represented an angular target size of .0024 radians. The .50 caliber bullet had a dispersion of .002 radians at that range. The margin of error was .0004 radians. This meant Archangelo's aim had to be perfect within approximately 10 inches at 400 yards. He could do this consistently because the modified buffer eliminated the variable of barrel climb. The gun stayed where he aimed it. He compensated for lead. He compensated for target speed. He did not have to compensate for recoil. This made him the most accurate ball turret gunner in the 8th Air Force. The Luftwaffe had learned something important about B-17 formations by October 1943. They had learned that American gunners struggled with deflection shooting. A fighter attacking from dead ahead or dead astern was relatively easy to hit. A fighter attacking from the beam, crossing at 90 degrees at 300 miles per H-hour, required the gunner to lead the target by several aircraft lengths. Most gunners couldn't do it consistently. The Luftwaffe exploited this weakness. Fighters attacked from the beam in waves, 4 or 5 at a time, rolling through the formation at high speed, firing short bursts, breaking away before the bomber gunners could track them effectively. Archangelo had discovered something during gunnery training at Kingman, Arizona, in early 1943. He discovered that if he fired in controlled 2-round bursts instead of sustained fire, he could keep the gun on target through recoil. The M2 Browning fired at 800 rounds per minute. A standard burst was 15 to 20 rounds. Archangelo's bursts were exactly 2 rounds. This gave him time to adjust his aim between bursts and track a crossing target continuously. The technique was not in the gunnery manual. The instructors at Kingman told him sustained fire was more effective for suppressing enemy fighters. Archangelo ignored them. The 91st Bomb Group had departed Basingbourn at 0947 that morning. 376 B-17s from 8 bomb groups. Target ball-bearing factories at Schweinfurt. The factories produce 52% of Germany's ball-bearing output. Destroying them would cripple German tank and aircraft production. Intelligence estimated 200 to 300 Luftwaffe fighters would intercept. The estimate was conservative. The first fighters appeared at 11:18, 20 minutes after the formation crossed into German airspace. Foch, Wolf 190s, 8 of them. They attacked from 12 o'clock high, diving through the lead squadron. Archangelo watched them pass overhead. Ball turret gunners couldn't engage fighters attacking from directly above. The turret's maximum elevation was 85 degrees. Anything higher was a blind spot. The FW-190s knew this. They exploited it. At 11:27, a second wave attacked from 3 o'clock level. 4 FW-190s. Archangelo rotated the turret to engage. The fighters were crossing left to right at 280 miles per hour range, 500 yards. He led the first fighter by 3 ship lengths and fired. 2 rounds. The tracers fell behind. He adjusted, led by 4 lengths, fired again. 2 rounds. A hit. White smoke from the FW-190's cowling. The fighter broke away, trailing vapor. Not a kill, not yet. But damaged. The third wave came at 11:34. 6 BF-109s from 9 o'clock low. This was the attack geometry Archangelo had been waiting for. Low beam attacks allowed the ball turret to engage with maximum effectiveness. The turret could track smoothly through horizontal rotation. No elevation changes required. Archangelo selected the lead 109 range, 400 yards, crossing speed, 300 miles per hour. He led by 5 ship lengths and fired 2 rounds miss. He adjusted immediately, led by 6 lengths, fired 2 rounds hit. The BF-109's left wing root erupted in orange flame. The fighter rolled inverted and dropped away. Confirmed kill. The modified recoil buffer was working. Archangelo could feel the difference. The gun stayed on target between bursts. He could track the fighters through their entire crossing pattern without losing sight picture. At 11:39, another wave. 4 BF-109s from 3 o'clock high. Archangelo engaged the trailing fighter. 2 round burst. Hit. The 109's canopy shattered. The fighter continued straight and level for 3 seconds, then nosed over into a dive. Pilot dead. Confirmed kill. The Luftwaffe adjusted. At 11:46, they sent 8 fighters simultaneously. 4 from 3 o'clock, 4 from 9 o'clock, crossing attack. The bomber formation's defensive fire had to split between 2 threat vectors. Archangelo stayed on the 9 o'clock fighters. The waist gunners handled 3 o'clock. He tracked the second fighter in the 9 o'clock wave range. 350 yards, 2 round burst, hit engine fire. The BF-109 broke left and descended. Confirmed kill. By 11:51, Archangelo had fired 127 rounds. The ball turret ammunition capacity was 270 rounds per GUN. He had 143 rounds remaining. The formation still had 41 minutes to target. Then 90 minutes back to friendly airspace. The Luftwaffe wasn't stopping. Another wave at 11:54. 6 FW-190s from 6 o'clock high. Archangelo rotated the turret 180 degrees. The fighters were attacking from astern, diving at 30 degrees. He engaged the lead fighter at 600 yards. 2 round burst miss. The FW-190s were closing fast. At 400 yards, he fired again. Hit. The fighter's propeller disintegrated. Metal fragments peppered the fuselage. The FW-190 snapped, rolled right and collided with his wingman. Both fighters exploded. 2 confirmed kills from a single burst. The oxygen system alarm activated at 11:58, yellow light. 10 minutes remaining. Archangelo's breathing was already labored. The ball turret position received supplemental oxygen through a tube connected to the aircraft's main system. The system was designed for operations at 25,000 feet for a maximum of 6 hours. The formation was at 27,000 feet. They had been at altitude for 7 hours and 38 minutes. The system was failing. At 12:03, the formation reached Schweinfurt. The bomb bay doors opened. Archangelo felt the aircraft shudder as 6,000 pounds of incendiaries released. The bomber climbed 300 feet immediately, weight reduction. The Luftwaffe knew the bombers were most vulnerable during the bomb run. 40 fighters attacked during the 3-minute bombing window. Archangelo engaged continuously. 2 round bursts, methodical, controlled. At 12:05, he hit a BF-109 attacking from 8 o'clock level, engine fire confirmed kill. At 12:06, he hit an FW-190 from 4 o'clock low, wing separation, confirmed kill. The oxygen light went red at 12:07, 5 minutes remaining. Archangelo's vision narrowed, peripheral blackout. Hypoxia, he kept firing. At 12:09, he engaged 3 BF-109s attacking in formation from 9 o'clock high. He tracked the middle fighter, 2. Round burst. Hit. The 109 broke formation trailing smoke. Not a kill. He shifted to the trailing fighter, 2. Round burst. Hit wing root fire. Confirmed kill. The formation turned west at 12:11. Heading home, the Luftwaffe pursued. They had learned that damaged bombers fell back from formation. Stragglers were easy targets. 3 B-17s from the 91st Bomb Group were already dropping behind. Engine damage, structural damage, dead crew. The fighters concentrated on them. Archangelo watched a B-17 from the 401st Squadron lose its entire tail section to 20 mm cannon fire. The bomber entered a flat spin and broke apart at 19,000 feet. No parachutes. At 12:17, the oxygen system failed completely. Red light. Zero pressure. Archangelo's breathing stopped producing results. He was pulling vacuum. His vision tunneled to a pinpoint. He could see the gun sight. Nothing else. At 12:19, 4 BF-109s attacked his aircraft specifically. They had identified the ball turret as a threat. Smart, they came from 4 different angles simultaneously. Archangelo tracked the 9 o'clock fighter by instinct. 2. Round burst. Hit, fuel tank explosion. The fighter disintegrated. Confirmed kill. He shifted to the 3 o'clock fighter. 2. Round burst. Miss, his hands were shaking. Hypoxia tremors. He fired again. Hit, canopy shatter. Pilot kill confirmed. The formation crossed back into Allied airspace at 13:34. The Luftwaffe broke off. Archangelo had been without oxygen for 87 minutes. He should have been unconscious. He should have been dead. He remained conscious through sheer physiological impossibility. The ball turret hatch opened at 13:42. The waist gunner pulled Archangelo out. His lips were blue. His fingernails were black. He was breathing in short, rapid gasps. The waist gunner administered emergency oxygen. Archangelo's vision returned after 4 minutes. The Bay, -17, landed at Basingbourn at 15:47. Archangelo climbed out of the aircraft and collapsed on the hard stand. The crew chief found him there 20 minutes later. The ball turret ammunition counter showed 31 rounds remaining. Archangelo had fired 239 rounds during the mission. Based on observed impacts and confirmed fighter losses, intelligence credited him with 11 confirmed kills and 4 probables. 3 days later, Archangelo flew another mission. The 17th of October, target aircraft factories at Regensburg. The Luftwaffe intercepted with 73 fighters. Archangelo engaged for 2 hours and 14 minutes. 6 confirmed kills. By the 23rd of October, his total was 17 confirmed kills. No other ball turret gunner in the 8th Air Force had more than 9. The base armament officer noticed something unusual during a routine inspection on the 28th of October. The recoil buffer on Archangelo's ball turret gun didn't match the technical specifications. The part number was wrong. The dimensions were wrong. The material composition was wrong. The officer asked Archangelo where the part came from. Archangelo explained he had fabricated it from salvaged hydraulic components. The officer asked if Archangelo had received authorization for the modification. Archangelo said no. The armament officer filed a violation report. Unauthorized modification of aircraft armament systems. Potential court-martial offense. The report went to the group commander, Colonel Stanley Ray. Ray reviewed the report alongside Archangelo's combat record. 17 confirmed kills, 0 malfunctions, 0 injuries caused by equipment failure. Ray made a decision that violated regulations but reflected operational reality. He buried the report. The modification was never entered into official records. No paperwork, no documentation. Nothing. Archangelo flew 31 combat missions between August and December 1943. He completed his tour on the 22nd of December. Final kill count 17 confirmed, 11 probable. He returned to the United States in January 1944. The Army Air Force promoted him to technical sergeant and assigned him to gunnery training at Fort Myers, Florida. He taught deflection shooting techniques: 2 round bursts, lead calculation, target tracking. The manual still recommended sustained fire. Archangelo taught his method anyway. The students at Fort Myers were young. Most were 18 or 19 years old. They had never been in combat. Archangelo spent the first week of every training cycle breaking their assumptions. He had them fire sustained bursts at crossing targets. They missed. Then he taught them 2 round bursts. They hit after 4 weeks. Most could hit a crossing target at 300 yards. Archangelo never mentioned the modified recoil buffer during training. The students were using standard equipment. Teaching them about modifications would have been pointless. What they could do was change their technique. 2 round bursts didn't require special equipment, just discipline and practice. The training program at Fort Myers graduated 340 ball turret gunners between January and August 1944. Intelligence tracked their combat performance. Gunners trained by Archangelo had a 42% higher hit rate than gunners trained by other instructors. They also had a 23% lower casualty rate. The correlation wasn't perfect. Combat was chaotic. Luck mattered. But the data suggested that Archangelo's technique worked. The Army Air Force added 2 round burst drills to the official gunnery manual in September 1944. They did not credit Archangelo. The manual presented the technique as standard doctrine that had always been part of the training program. Archangelo didn't care about credit. He cared about results. If the technique saved lives, that was sufficient. He continued teaching until August 1944, when the Army Air Force reassigned him to administrative duties at Maxwell Field, Alabama. The war was moving into its final phase. The need for new gunners was declining. The B-29 Superfortress was entering service with remote-controlled turrets. Human ball turret gunners were being phased out. Archangelo's expertise was obsolete. He spent the last year of the war processing discharge paperwork for returning aircrew. He never flew again. He never fired a .50 caliber machine gun again. The modified recoil buffer remained on B-17F number 42 to 30,177 BT. The aircraft flew 89 combat missions between August 1943 and April 1945. 7 different ball turret gunners used Archangelo's guns during those missions. None of them knew about the modification. None of them noticed anything unusual. The guns worked. That was all they needed to know. The aircraft was damaged by flak over Kassel on the 7th of April, 1945. Both engines on the left wing were hit. The pilot managed to return to base, but the aircraft was deemed beyond economic repair. It was towed to the salvage yard at Bassingbourn. The salvage crew stripped the aircraft of usable parts. The ball turret guns were removed and placed in storage. The modified recoil buffer went with them. No inspection was conducted. No anomalies were noted. In July 1945, the war in Europe ended. The storage facility at Bassingbourn held 4,200 .50 caliber machine guns removed from scrapped aircraft. The Army Air Force needed to dispose of them. Some were shipped back to the United States for depot, level rebuilding. Most were sold as scrap metal. The Browning M2S from B-17F, number 42 to 30,177 BT, were in the scrap category. They were loaded onto a truck, along with 340 other guns. and transported to a smelting facility in Birmingham, England. The facility melted them down and recast the metal into industrial billets. The modified recoil buffer was destroyed along with everything else. No documentation existed to indicate it had ever been different from any other buffer. The only record of the modification existed in Colonel Stanley Ray's personal files. Ray had kept the violation report filed by the armament officer in October 1943. He had not destroyed it. He had simply removed it from the official record and placed it in a locked filing cabinet in his office. When Ray retired from the Air Force in 1952, he took the filing cabinet with him. The report remained there until Ray's death in 1979. His widow donated his papers to the Air Force Historical Research Agency at Maxwell Air Force Base. The violation report was in Box 27, Folder 14, along with 600 other administrative documents from Ray's tenure as commander of the 91st Bomb Group. Nobody read it. The Air Force Historical Research Agency held 70 million pages of documents. Most had never been digitized. Most had never been reviewed by historians. The violation report existed. It was accessible to researchers, but nobody knew to look for it. The report remained in Box 27, Folder 14, unread and unnoticed. In 1998, a graduate student at the University of Texas researching ball turret gunner effectiveness requested records from the Air Force Historical Research Agency. Her name was Caroline Voss. The agency sent her 14 boxes of documents. In Box 27, Folder 14, she found the violation report, 2 pages. Unauthorized modification. Custom recoil buffer. Staff Sergeant Michael Archangelo. Dated the 28th of October, 1943. Below the armament officer's signature was a handwritten note from Colonel Ray. Report filed, no action required. Combat effectiveness takes precedence. Voss Cross referenced the report with Archangelo's records, 17 confirmed kills, 0 weapon malfunctions. She expanded her research. Training records from Fort Myers showed his students had 42% higher hit rates. Maintenance logs from B-17F number 42 to 30,177. BT showed 0 turret issues across 89 missions and 7 different gunners. Voss published her findings in 2000, Innovation Under Fire, Unauthorized Modifications and Combat Effectiveness in the 8th Air Force. The book received limited attention. Archangelo's story occupied 18 pages in a 340-page book. Most readers skipped it. Archangelo died 2 years before publication, never knowing the violation report had survived. The modified recoil buffer solved a specific problem under specific circumstances. The problem was excessive barrel climb during sustained fire from a ball turret mount. The circumstances were combat operations at 25,000 feet against fighters attacking at crossing angles. The solution was a hydraulic buffer that dampened recoil energy more effectively than a spring-loaded buffer. The modification worked because Archangelo understood both the mechanical problem and the combat requirement. He was a machinist who became a gunner. He applied manufacturing knowledge to a tactical problem. The result was a weapon that performed 40% better than the standard configuration. The broader lesson is about field innovation versus institutional process. The Army Air Force had a formal process for weapon modifications. Submit a request. Wait for engineering review. Wait for approval. Wait for manufacturing. Wait for distribution. The process took months, sometimes years. Archangelo didn't have months. He had weeks before his first combat mission. He needed a solution immediately. So he built one. He violated regulations. He risked court-martial. He did it anyway because the alternative was flying into combat with a weapon he knew was inadequate. The modified recoil buffer remained on ball turret gun number 42 to 30,177. BT until the aircraft was scrapped in July 1945. Nobody knew it was there. Nobody looked. The part had no serial number, no manufacturer's stamp. No traceability, it existed outside the maintenance system. When the aircraft was dismantled, the buffer was removed and discarded with the rest of the salvage. No record of its existence survived. By war's end, the Army Air Force had lost 4 754B-17s in combat. Ball turret gunners accounted for 23% of B-17 air to air kills, despite representing only 10% of defensive firepower. The position had the highest casualty rate of any crew position. 38% of ball turret gunners were killed or wounded in action. The position was eliminated from B-29 bomber designs in 1944. Remote-controlled turrets replaced human gunners. More effective. Less vulnerable. The age of the ball turret gunner ended. Michael Archangelo left the Army Air Force in 1946. He returned to Chicago and worked as a machinist for Caterpillar Tractor Company. He never spoke publicly about his combat record. When asked about the war, he said he had been a gunner. He did not mention the 17 kills. He did not mention the modified recoil buffer. He did not mention the 87 minutes without oxygen over Schweinfurt. Archangelo died on the 8th of March, 1998. He was 78 years old. His military records listed him as a ball turret gunner with the 91st Bomb Group, 8th Air Force. 17 confirmed kills. The records did not explain how those kills were achieved. They did not mention unauthorized modifications. They did not mention that the weapon system responsible for those kills was never officially documented. The combat reports from October 1943 remain in the National Archives. They list Archangelo's kills by date and location. They do not list the technical modifications that made those kills possible. Nobody asked. Nobody investigated. The results spoke for themselves. 17 enemy aircraft destroyed. The methodology was irrelevant. Modern Air Force doctrine emphasizes standardization. Every weapon system is documented. Every modification is authorized. Every component is traceable. This approach ensures reliability and accountability. It also eliminates the kind of field innovation that allowed a Chicago machinist to build a better gun from salvaged parts and use it to kill 17 enemy fighters. The lesson is not that regulations should be ignored. The lesson is that warfare creates problems that cannot always be solved through official channels. Sometimes the solution requires an iron worker with a lathe and the willingness to risk court. Marshall. Sometimes the best weapon is the one that doesn't exist on paper. Archangelo understood this. He built what he needed. He used it. He survived. The weapon disappeared. The kills remained. That was enough.